Hi everyone, my name is Alicia Kozak and I am an abduction survivor. Some of you may already know my story. When I was 13, I was lured by an online predator, abducted and held captive before I was rescued. That experience, it changed my life forever, and it made me the first child to be abducted by an internet predator. Since then, for over 20 years, I've made it my mission to protect families from the evolving dangers online. I've dedicated my voice and my platform to advocating for online safety, for greater awareness of child exploitation, and for missing people. From speaking in schools to educating the public through the media, from working in law enforcement and to shaping critical legislation, I've devoted my life to making the digital world and the real world safer. Today, I want to talk to you about a case that stunned the nation and the world, the tragic story of Gabby Petito. Gabby was a bright, creative, loving young woman whose life was cut short in 2021. Her disappearance and subsequent homicide sparked a media frenzy, tremendous public interest, and heated conversations about domestic violence, missing persons, and the power of social media. Back then, I followed Gabby's story closely, holding on to hope that she would be found safe. And like so many others, I was heartbroken to learn of her tragic end. Recently, I watched the Netflix documentary about her case, American Murder, Gabby Petito, and it inspired me to share this message with all of you. But before we get into this, I want to acknowledge that this is a difficult topic. Whenever we talk about loss, trauma, and violence, it can stir deep emotions within us. If you find yourself triggered or overwhelmed at any point during this video, please remember to hit pause, breathe, and reach out for help if you need it. My intention here is not to sensationalize Gabby's story, but to highlight the lessons we can learn, and more importantly, to continue the conversation around prevention, intervention, and empathy. I'll be reflecting on this case through my own lens as someone who knows the fear of isolation and captivity, the trauma of unexpected violence, and the power of a compassionate public. I hope by sharing these thoughts, we can honor Gabby's memory and stand in solidarity with her family and loved ones. Let's also remind ourselves that we each have a role to play in preventing future tragedies. By now, so many people are familiar with Gabby Petito's story. Gabby was a 22-year-old woman from Blue Point, New York, who set off on a cross-country van trip with her fiancé, Brian Laundrie. It seemed like a dream adventure, traveling across beautiful national parks, documenting their life on social media, and inspiring thousands of people to explore the outdoors. Yet, beneath the seemingly idyllic surface, there were signs of turbulence. In late August of 2021, Gabby stopped communicating with her family. The last time they heard from her, she was near Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming. Days turned into weeks, and no one could get a hold of her. Finally, on September 11th, 2021, after many anxious attempts to reach her, Gabby's family reported her missing. Alarm bells started going off. Where is Gabby? Meanwhile, Brian Laundrie had returned to his family's home in Florida alone, driving the same van the couple had shared. He declined to speak with law enforcement or with Gabby's family about her disappearance. Immediately, the public was gripped by the unanswered questions. How did Brian get back to Florida without Gabby? Where was she? And why wouldn't he talk? As law enforcement and volunteers mounted a nationwide search for Gabby, body camera footage and a 911 call emerged from a traffic stop in Moab, Utah. On August 12th, it showed Gabby visibly upset, and she described turmoil in her relationship. A witness claimed to have seen Brian striking Gabby, which raised even more concern about potential domestic violence. It sparked discussions of possible signs of emotional and physical abuse, though the specifics weren't entirely clear at the time. Then came the heartbreaking discovery. On September 19th, 2021, authorities found human remains in the Spread Creek dispersed camping area at Bridger-Teton National Forest in Wyoming. Shortly thereafter, the remains were confirmed to be Gabby's. Her death was officially ruled a homicide, and it was later determined she died by strangulation around late August. What followed was a media frenzy, combined with a desperate manhunt for Brian Laundrie, who had disappeared into the Carlton Reserve in Florida. Then weeks later, his remains were found, along with a notebook in which he confessed responsibility for Gabby's death. The case was closed, but the public debate and emotional turmoil continued. People wondered, how could this have happened? What more could have been done to protect Gabby? In the aftermath, Gabby's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against law enforcement in Moab, highlighting ongoing questions about how potential domestic violence cases are handled. Hearing about Gabby's disappearance, it made me think about my own trauma. While our stories are so different in so many ways, the overarching theme of unexpected violence, manipulation, and a struggle for survival resonates deeply. I was 13 when I was abducted by somebody I met online, a person who lied, manipulated, and eventually lured me from my home. The terror of realizing that someone you trusted or thought you knew is actually a danger to your life, it's indescribable. In Gabby's case, Brian Laundrie was somebody she'd been in a relationship with for years, someone she very likely trusted, and it can be so disorienting to witness signs of potential abuse or manipulation from someone you love. Victims often find themselves torn between wanting to trust their partner and suspecting that something might be terribly wrong. When the person hurting you is also the person you love, it becomes that much more difficult to acknowledge the reality of the situation, let alone seek help. And throughout my journey, I've encountered so many people who've asked me, why didn't you escape? Why didn't you try to fight back harder? But fear, it's paralyzing, And abusers, they thrive on fear. They manipulate, isolate, and exert control in ways that aren't always visible to outsiders. Gabby's story, including the footage from the police stop in Moab, raises important questions about how we, as a society, respond to signs of distress. In those moments, Gabby seemed frightened and apologetic. She even took some blame upon herself. And that was a red flag that's common among abuse survivors, who often internalize blame or try to keep the peace in the face of conflict. And the overwhelming response to Gabby's disappearance, especially on social media, echoes the power of collective concern that I experienced when I was missing. People I never met prayed for my safe return. They shared my picture online and offline, and they watched out for any clue that might help bring me home. That collective vigilance can really make a difference in missing person cases. It's heartening to see how communities mobilize, but it also brings home the reality that so many people, women, men, and children, go missing without that same level of public outcry. Gabby's story, like my own, underscores a grim truth about society's vulnerability. The people we trust most can sometimes pose the greatest threats. It's a frightening realization, but one that must be discussed openly. If we shy away from these hard conversations, we risk leaving countless victims in the dark. One of the most striking aspects of Gabby's case was the enormous role played by social media. Gabby had been sharing parts of her van life journey on platforms like Instagram and on YouTube. After she went missing, thousands of internet sleuths began analyzing her posts, looking for hidden clues, potential signs of abuse, or location details that might help pinpoint her whereabouts. In my own abduction story, my case unfolded in an era when online chat rooms and internet connections were still very new. While social media wasn't as ubiquitous as it is today, the internet still proved to be the place where my abductor first found me. Now we live in an age where apps like TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube can amplify a person's story within minutes, reaching millions of people across the globe, which is why I make the stop scrolling videos to help bring the missing home. When Gabby went missing, these platforms became crucial in a couple ways. There was a crowdsourced investigation, and amateur detectives scoured Gabby's digital footprint to piece together a timeline of her movements. Social media posts, old YouTube footage, even random sightings shared by strangers online helped create a real-time account of where Gabby might have been and who she interacted with. This collective effort of total strangers came from a genuine place of concern and showcased how technology can be harnessed for good. It certainly helped raise awareness, but we as the people sharing it must also have accountability. Social media platforms also served as a public forum, putting pressure on the authorities and individuals close to Gabby to act quickly. Hashtags and viral videos kept her face and name in the spotlight. And this kind of visibility can be a double-edged sword. While it helps keep victims' stories alive, it can also lead to misinformation, speculation, and sensationalism. As a survivor, I can say that public awareness and swift action truly matter. My missing poster was shared worldwide, and because of that, I was rescued when someone recognized the little girl in the predator's live stream of my abuse. But Gabby's story also highlights how not all media attention is constructive or well-intentioned. Rumors, conspiracies, and harassing messages often crop up in high-profile cases, adding stress to the victims' families. The takeaway is very clear. Social media can be a powerful tool for finding missing people and for rallying public support. However, it must be used responsibly and compassionately, with a focus on facts and empathy rather than gossip or judgment. In a broader sense, we should encourage a more consistent use of social media to uplift and publicize all missing persons. One of the heartbreaking realities that Gabby's case has brought into the spotlight is the prevalence and complexity of domestic violence. The Moab police footage showed Gabby in a visibly distressed state, apologizing for what she described to be a fight. The officers ultimately separated Gabby and Brian for the evening, and no charges were filed. Many survivors of domestic violence often express that red flags are missed by friends, family, and even authorities. An abuse that can be emotional, verbal, physical, or a combination of all three. It can be hidden behind smiles and Instagram photos, or in public, it can manifest in subtle gestures of control, like someone controlling what you wear, where you go, whom you speak with, and how you spend your own money. In my case, while my abduction wasn't perpetrated by a long-term partner, I still experienced manipulative tactics that abusers employ to control a victim's emotions and their actions. There's a pattern: tension building, an abusive incident, and a honeymoon phase where the abuser might apologize or show remorse, leading to a victim to stay. Over time, it becomes a cycle that is so hard to escape, especially if the victim fears for their life or has become financially or emotionally dependent on their abuser. Gabby's story offers a stark reminder that domestic violence can happen to anyone, regardless of their background, age, or how picture-perfect their life might seem on social media. It underscores the importance of recognizing warning signs, like abrupt personality changes, social withdrawal, unexplained injuries, or repeated anxious apologies on the part of the victim. More than that, it reminds us to listen to survivors without judgment. Victims often grapple with guilt and shame. They don't need us to say, "I told you so," or "Why didn't you leave sooner?" Instead, they need safe spaces, supportive individuals, and real resources. We also need to recognize when law enforcement itself may be undertrained or overburdened in handling domestic violence calls. If Gabby's case can motivate one thing, I hope it's a collective reflection on how we can better identify, support, and protect those who are experiencing intimate partner violence. Another question I often get, both in connection with my own story and in discussions about Gabby Petito, is what can we do to prevent these kinds of tragedies? Well, there's no simple one-size-fits-all solution here, but we can start with greater vigilance and with compassion. It's important to look out for and be aware of changes in behavior. In retrospect, Gabby's parents and friends saw signs that they rationalized away. If you see a friend or loved one suddenly withdraw from social activities, exhibit anxious behavior, or start making excuses for their partner's action, take note. These may be signs they're experiencing emotional or even physical abuse. Secondly, create a safe space to talk. Abusers often thrive on isolation. Make sure friends and family know that they can confide in you without fear of judgment. Let them know that you believe them and that you're there to help them. It's also important to know the resources. Hotlines, crisis centers, and support organizations exist specifically to help victims. Be prepared to share information about local domestic violence shelters, counseling services, and emergency numbers like the National Domestic Violence Hotline. I'll provide that in the description below. And then law enforcement involvement may be necessary. If you suspect immediate danger, please contact law enforcement, but also understand that victims might be afraid of the repercussions of involving the police. Respect their choices while gently guiding them toward professional help and safety planning. And never trivialize their pain. Statements like, "It's not that bad," or "maybe you're overreacting," can push them further into silence. You want to validate their feelings. When we know the signs and act with compassion, we can help prevent the escalation of violence. It may not save everyone, but it can be a crucial step in saving even one life. It is impossible to talk about Gabby Petito's case without talking about the overwhelming media attention. News networks, tabloids, podcasts, talk shows, and online forums were all discussing her disappearance daily. The attention certainly helped in keeping her story on the front page, mobilizing search efforts, and possibly expediting the discovery of crucial evidence. While Gabby's story absolutely rightfully deserved attention, it's important to note that countless people go missing every year without even a fraction of the coverage she received. As someone who was a missing child, I can attest to how powerful media attention can be when it comes to finding leads and generating public tips. But this disparity also means we need to think critically about why some stories go viral and others remain in the shadows. Every missing person is someone's child, friend, or loved one, and they all deserve the same level of urgency. Moving forward, we can use Gabby's case as a teaching moment, pushing news outlets and social media users to amplify stories of all missing persons. We can also place responsibility on ourselves. When we see a missing person alert from our hometown or from videos like mine, we can share it on our platforms. We can support local families, local nonprofits, and volunteer networks. Perhaps one day, everyone will receive the same level of nationwide empathy and support that Gabby's case stirred. And until then, it's on us to use the resources at our disposal to extend that empathy and awareness to all. Another vital aspect of discussing Gabby Petito's case, or really any high-profile tragedy, is remembering that friends and family are watching. Gabby's parents, family, and close friends may very well come across our posts, comments, and videos. The same is true for countless other families affected by missing, exploited, or deceased loved ones. This means that we always need to be mindful of our language, our tone, and the way we speculate online. Please be careful how you respond in the comments to this. Harsh judgments, unverified rumors, and insensitive jokes can inflict real harm on people who are already grieving. Families of missing persons and victims often turn to social media or news outlets searching for any new piece of information or sign of public support. When they encounter hurtful comments or baseless conspiracy theories, it can compound their trauma. And I'm speaking from experience. So if you're watching this video or engage in any discussion online, please always be considerate. If you have thoughts or opinions, share them constructively. If you disagree with certain aspects of the investigation, voice that respectfully. And if you're offering theories, do so with the caveat that they remain theories and avoid presenting guesswork as fact. At the end of the day, we owe it to the families to show empathy. Gabby's family has been transparent about their ongoing grief. They've thanked the public for their support, but they've also made it clear that hurtful speculation is difficult to endure. Extending kindness and compassion to them and to other families in similar situations is a very simple yet powerful way to honor the memory of those who have been lost. Gabby Petito was so much more than a headline. She was a daughter, a friend, someone with dreams of seeing the world, sharing her adventures, and living life to the absolute fullest. In her memory, her family established the Gabby Petito Foundation, which supports organizations that advocate for survivors of domestic violence. By contributing to these initiatives, sharing their message, or volunteering our time, we can help ensure that Gabby's life continues to have a positive impact, even in the wake of the tragedy. Gabby's story continues to inspire communities worldwide to look out for each other. especially for those in vulnerable situations. Through my story and advocacy, I learned that community intervention, media visibility, and empathy can literally save lives. Gabby's story, although it ended in unthinkable heartbreak, also illustrates the public cares and will act when given clear direction and accurate information. And there are some concrete steps that we can all take. We can all start by educating ourselves, learning about the warning signs of abuse, trauma responses, and the resources that are available to survivors. This knowledge makes us better prepared to notice red flags and offer meaningful help. Next, it's important to use our voices. If you see troubling signs on social media like pleas for help or distressing content, report it and reach out. Be tactful, but don't be silent, because silence can allow harmful situations to escalate. In addition, we should support legislation and policy that champions stronger protections for abuse survivors, better funding for missing persons investigations, and improved training for law enforcement on domestic violence and trauma. Our elected officials need to understand that these issues are a priority. We also need to mentor and educate the next generation by having open conversations about internet safety, healthy relationships, and self-advocacy. Teaching them to recognize manipulative behavior and to value their own boundaries fosters resilience and awareness. We owe it to Gabby and to every survivor to learn from her story. If we truly want to honor her memory, we must channel our heartbreak into a fierce commitment to protect one another. That means being unafraid to stand up against violence, to speak out when we see something wrong, and to believe survivors when they find the courage to come forward. Ultimately, the greatest tribute we can pay Gabby is to create safer communities for everyone. Let's harness our collective power to prevent future tragedies and to uplift those who are still finding their way to safety. Thank you so much for watching and listening to my reflection on Gabby Petito's tragic story. As someone who survived an abduction, I understand the power of collective awareness, compassion, and vigilant advocacy. Gabby's story has left a mark on millions of people, fueling conversations about domestic violence, the power of social media, and the importance of ensuring that every missing persons case is taken seriously. If there's one thing I hope you take away from this discussion, it's the message that each of us can make a difference, no matter how small it might seem. Whether it's reaching out to a friend in need, sharing a missing persons flyer or video, volunteering at a shelter, or simply educating yourself on warning signs of abuse, every action adds up. Together, we can help build a world where no one suffers in silence, where resources are accessible to every victim, and where tragedies like Gabby Petito's become increasingly rare. In honor of Gabby and all of the survivors out there, let's commit to caring, to advocating, and to never looking the other way when help is needed. And please remember, the families of those who are missing or who have experienced tragedy are watching too. So let's offer them kindness and respect. Thank you for watching, and please stay safe, remain vigilant, and be kind to one another. And I will see you in the next video.